The evening at the Silver Spoon had begun like any other, soft jazz floating through the air, the aroma of truffle butter and roasted garlic mingling with the chatter of Boston's elite, the clink of wine glasses punctuating laughter from corner tables. Olivia Bennet had been on her feet since 4 o'clock that afternoon, rehearsing every step in her mind: greet with a smile, serve with precision, and never let your nerves show. She had already been warned twice that week, and she knew that even a small mistake could be her last. The Silver Spoon wasn't just another restaurant, it was an institution of luxury, a place where CEOs and politicians came to be seen, and perfection was the only acceptable standard. For Olivia, though, perfection had always felt just one misstep away. As she carried a steaming plate of pasta across the dining room, she could feel the weight of the eyes around her. She knew they were watching, the same regulars who complained if their water glasses weren't refilled fast enough, the same patrons who would send food back if it wasn't plated exactly as it appeared on the menu. Her palms were slick with sweat, but she steadied her breath, silently counting each step like she was walking a tightrope. It wasn't supposed to happen. The plate shouldn't have slipped. Yet in a heartbeat, her hand trembled, the porcelain wobbled, and before she could catch it, it hit the floor with a sharp, echoing crash, the sound cut through the music like glass through silk. The chatter died. Forks paused midair. Conversations faltered into silence. Olivia froze where she stood, her hazel eyes wide and her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment, no one moved. It was as if the entire restaurant had collectively inhaled and forgotten how to exhale. Then, slowly, the eyes turned toward her, some sympathetic, others judgmental, but all fixated on the trembling young woman standing over the shattered remains of her mistake. She dropped to her knees instantly, murmuring apologies that fell flat in the quiet. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," she whispered, picking up shards of porcelain and bits of ruined pasta, feeling the heat of humiliation burn across her face. The couple whose meal she had destroyed, a well-dressed man in a navy blazer and a woman in pearls, looked down at her with tight, polite smiles. Their anniversary dinner now lay in ruins at her feet. Olivia's hands shook as she reached for a larger piece of the broken plate, her fingertips catching on a sharp edge. A small bead of blood bloomed at her skin, but she didn't even flinch. The embarrassment hurt more than the cut ever could. Then came the voice, sharp, clipped, and unmistakable. "Ms. Bennet. My office. Now." Richard Maxwell's words carried across the room like a gavel strike. The manager's presence alone was enough to send most servers into a quiet panic. Tall, poised, with graying hair and a perpetual air of control, Richard ran the Silver Spoon like a symphony, every movement timed, every word measured. The last thing he tolerated was discord. Olivia stood up, clutching a handful of broken porcelain, and opened her mouth to apologize, but Richard's hand landed firmly on her shoulder. His grip wasn't cruel, but it was decisive. "Daniel will clean that up," he said, steering her toward the back hallway. "You and I need to talk." Each step toward his office felt like a countdown. Olivia could hear her pulse in her ears, drowning out the music that had resumed faintly in the background. The glances from her coworkers were full of pity. Everyone knew what this walk meant. By the time they reached the door, her throat had gone dry, and the dread inside her had turned heavy, like a stone lodged in her chest. Richard didn't waste a second once the door shut behind them. "This is the final straw," he began, his tone crisp, his disappointment palpable. "You've been distracted, careless, and frankly a liability. 2 broken wine glasses last week. A spilled soup on Tuesday. And now this? The chef is furious." Olivia's breath came in short, uneven bursts. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but no words came out. She had rehearsed excuses before: too much pressure, nerves, exhaustion, but none of them mattered now. "Please," she managed finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need this job, Richard. I'm getting better, I promise. It's just been it's not working out," he cut in, exhaling through his nose. He ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair, the picture of controlled frustration. The Silver Spoon maintains certain standards, Olivia. We cater to Boston's elite. Every server here is expected to be flawless. Flawless. The word stung. She wasn't flawless, she never had been. But she was trying. God, she was trying. Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke again, her voice trembling with desperation. Please don't fire me. I'll do anything. I can work the slower shifts, take fewer tables, stay late to clean the silverware. I can't lose this job. Richard's expression softened, though he tried to hide it. He'd seen plenty of employees come and go, but Olivia's determination was different. She wasn't lazy, just unlucky, and perhaps too fragile for the high-wire act that was fine dining. He sighed, leaning back in his chair. Look, I understand your situation. But my hands are tied. Mr. Harris is visiting this week, and you know what that means. James Harris. The name alone sent a ripple of anxiety through every employee at the Silver Spoon. The billionaire owner of the restaurant chain was famous for his impossible standards and unpredictable temper. He was the kind of man who noticed everything, from the placement of the cutlery to the color of a waiter's tie. Rumor had it that he'd once fired an entire kitchen staff after a single undercooked steak. Olivia's heart sank. She knew what this meant. If she made one more mistake while Harris was in town, not even Richard could protect her. Please, she said softly, meeting his eyes. Just one more chance. He hesitated, tapping a finger on the desk. Finally, he nodded. Fine. One more chance. But that's it. No more mistakes. Understand? Relief washed over her, almost dizzying in its intensity. She nodded quickly, the tears spilling over now. Thank you. I understand. The rest of her shift passed in silence. Her hands still trembled as she carried each plate, but she didn't falter. She forced herself to breathe, to focus, to make it through the night without incident. And somehow, she did. When the last guest had left and the lights had dimmed, Olivia retreated to the staff room, exhaustion pressing on every bone in her body. She hung up her apron and rubbed her sore wrists, ready to go home and collapse into bed. But as she turned toward the exit, she noticed something strange. A man sitting alone at the bar. It was late, well past closing, and the rest of the staff had already clocked out. The man sat quietly, his posture relaxed, a nearly empty glass of whiskey before him. He wasn't dressed like the usual clientele, no expensive suit, no gold watch. Just a button-down shirt, sleeves rolled up, and dark jeans. He looked like someone who belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. Olivia hesitated before approaching him. Excuse me, she said gently. I'm sorry, but we're closed now. He looked up, and for a moment, their eyes met. His were a sharp, clear blue, piercing yet kind. Sorry about that, he said with a small smile. I got caught up in some work. Something in his tone disarmed her. The smile wasn't patronizing or dismissive. The next morning, sunlight filtered through Olivia's thin apartment curtains, washing her small kitchen in pale gold. She sat at the table, staring at a half-empty cup of coffee gone cold, replaying the events of the previous night over and over in her head. The sound of the plates shattering, Richard's voice echoing in her ears, the pitying looks from coworkers, all of it blended into a blur of humiliation. Yet, amid the exhaustion and regret, one thing stood out clearly: that man at the bar. Nick. His calm voice, his warm eyes, the strange sense of reassurance in his words. She'd spent half the night wondering who he really was and why his brief conversation felt so significant. But morning brought no answers, only another day, another chance to prove herself before the thin ice beneath her finally cracked. By the time Olivia arrived at the Silver Spoon, the staff were already abuzz with whispers. Word had spread quickly: James Harris, the elusive owner, was expected to visit sometime this week. For most employees, This meant a mix of panic and adrenaline. For Olivia, it felt like standing on a ledge with a storm approaching. She couldn't afford even a single slip, not now. Her apron was tied tighter than usual, her posture straighter, her movements slower and more deliberate. Every plate she carried, every glass she poured, she handled as if it were made of air. The lunch rush came fast and heavy. The soft hum of conversation filled the restaurant, the clink of silverware and faint scent of rosemary drifting through the air. Olivia moved quietly between tables, smiling politely, her exhaustion tucked neatly behind her professionalism. But her mind was still restless, bouncing between anxiety and determination. She caught sight of Richard a few times, pacing near the bar with his clipboard, his eyes scanning everything and everyone. Occasionally, his gaze would linger on her, and she'd nod slightly to show that she was still holding steady. He nodded back once, a silent acknowledgement that she was doing fine so far. Around mid-afternoon, while clearing a table, she overheard two waiters whispering by the kitchen door. "He's here," one said in a low voice. "James Harris just walked in. Table 7. The words froze her mid-step. The air seemed to grow thicker, and her pulse quickened. She turned her head slightly and saw him, a man in his late 40s, tall and composed, wearing a tailored navy suit. His presence commanded attention without effort. Even without an introduction, anyone could tell he was the kind of man people didn't dare cross. James Harris wasn't just a name on a paycheck, he was a legend in the industry. Ruthless, brilliant, unpredictable. The stories about his temper were practically folklore among restaurant workers, how he once fired a sous chef for a slightly overcooked risotto or walked out of a board meeting because his coffee wasn't brewed correctly. He didn't tolerate imperfection, and he especially despised excuses. Olivia's first instinct was to stay out of sight, but fate, it seemed, had other plans. Moments later, Richard called her over quietly. "Olivia," he said under his breath, "Table 7 just asked for another server. Emma's stuck with a catering order. Can you cover for a few minutes?" Her heart dropped. "Table 7?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, and please, just keep it smooth. No mistakes." Every nerve in Olivia's body was on high alert as she approached the table. Harris sat alone, scanning his tablet while sipping an espresso. His expression was unreadable, sharp eyes flicking up only when she reached the table. "Good afternoon, sir," she managed, forcing her voice steady. "May I get you anything else?" He looked at her for a long moment before responding, as if assessing something beyond her words. "You're new," he said simply. It wasn't a question. Olivia nodded slightly. "Yes, sir. I started a few months ago." He didn't smile, didn't frown, just studied her in silence before setting the tablet down. "You handled that spill last night." Her breath caught. So he knew. Somehow, he knew. "Why yes," she admitted softly, wishing she could disappear into the floor. "It won't happen again." Harris leaned back, fingers steepled together. "Mistakes happen. What matters is how people handle them." His tone wasn't unkind, but there was something measured about it, like a man testing a theory. "Do you like it here?" he asked suddenly. The question startled her. I do," she said after a moment. "It's challenging, but I'm learning a lot." He nodded once, then returned to his espresso. "Good answer." A faint smirk touched his lips, but only briefly. Then he lifted his hand slightly, signaling that the conversation was over. Olivia walked away, her knees weak, her mind spinning. She had no idea what to make of that exchange. Was it a warning, a compliment, or something else entirely? The rest of her shift passed in a tense blur. Each movement felt heavier, more deliberate. When Harris finally left, the staff collectively exhaled, as if the air itself had been held hostage during his presence. Richard gave Olivia a subtle nod of approval, one that meant, "You survived." It wasn't much, but it was something. That night, Olivia stayed late to help close, wiping down tables and polishing silverware long after everyone else had gone. The dining room was silent, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the background the only sound. Her body ached, her hands sore, but she wasn't ready to leave yet. Something about the stillness of the empty restaurant comforted her. "Still here?" a voice called from the bar. She turned, startled. It was the man from last night, Nick. The same blue-eyed stranger who had spoken to her after closing. "How did you?" she began, but he smiled and held up a hand. "Relax. I'm not stalking you. I had a meeting with someone upstairs. Thought I'd grab a drink before heading out." Olivia blinked, caught between surprise and curiosity. "You're a regular here?" "Not exactly," he said, settling onto a bar stool. "But I visit the place from time to time. They make a decent old-fashioned." She hesitated before joining him, keeping a polite distance. "You gave me quite a pep talk yesterday," she said, managing a small smile. Nick chuckled. "Yeah, you looked like you needed it." He studied her for a moment, then added, "Rough day again?" "You could say that," she admitted, sighing. "The owner came by today. I think I aged 10 years in one shift." Nick tilted his head, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "James Harris?" She nodded. "You've heard of him?" A small smile played on his lips. "You could say that." Something about his tone struck her as odd, but she didn't press. Instead, they talked quietly as she finished cleaning, a simple, easy conversation about everything from Boston winters to favorite books. It felt strangely natural, as if she were speaking to someone she'd known for years. When she finally turned to leave, Nick said something that stopped her in her tracks. "Don't let other people decide what you're worth, Olivia. You've got more strength than you think." The words hung in the air, firm but gentle. She wanted to ask him how he knew her name, but before she could, he was already slipping on his coat. "Good night," he said simply, his tone calm and confident, like someone who already knew what tomorrow would bring. As he left, Olivia's mind buzzed with confusion. There was something about him, something she couldn't quite place. Who was he, really? The next day, the mystery began to unravel. When Olivia arrived at work, the restaurant was unusually quiet. Richard was pacing by the front desk, his expression unreadable. "Staff meeting," he said briskly, ushering everyone into the dining area. The tension was palpable. Olivia stood near the back, heart pounding as Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Harris has made some management decisions," he began, his voice careful. "He'll be appointing a new regional operations director to oversee staff development and internal training." He paused, glancing toward the doorway.